welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 280, and today's date is February 3rd, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Economy is Now Showing Signs of Collapsing. And let's just review here for a second. What do we know? Well, during the holiday season, we understand that sales were terrible. The stores were reporting that things were just horrific. People were not buying, and it was just really bad. And as soon as the holiday season was over, Macy's just announced, they're closing about 5 stores, laying off about 2,500 people. JCPenney's closing 33 stores, laying off 2,000 or so people. And we can see how this is all playing out. And they were hoping to increase sales in January by offering huge discounts. That did not work out well. Nothing is going on there, and more stores are starting to close. Sears is closing stores, Aéropostale is closing stores, and there are going to be many other stores closing because sales are just not there. What do we know in the real estate market? Well, we understand that mortgage applications are plunging around 66%. The majority of the homes that are being purchased are in cash from hedge funds and investors, and that is going to start to slow because, again, the Fed is tapering, so they're not getting that easy money. And now they're trying to unload these houses, but guess what? They're having a problem because they cannot find Americans with money to purchase these homes. The American people are tapped out. Most of them do not have good credit. Most of them are just trying to make it day by day. Because if we look at the unemployment rate, and I'm not talking about the illusion and the manipulated unemployment rate, I'm talking about the actual unemployment, it's around 30 to 37% depending on the calculation that you use. So most of these people have no work whatsoever. And in the last couple of reports that I've been reporting on, I've been showing that more and more people are getting laid off, and this is not going to work out well. And we understand that the unemployment extension, the benefit extension for unemployment, has come to an end, and of course the Senate is still, and the Congress are still, talking about what they should do, if they should extend it for 3 months or not. But 1.3 million people are going to eventually fall off of the system, and the unemployment rate is going to drop again. But this is an illusion. And look at the stock market today. That has come down 326 points. We look at the earnings of companies. We see what's actually going on. Things are not what they seem, and it's all starting to reach a point where people are saying, you know what? There is something wrong. Let me take my profits right now and let me get out. We understand that insiders are starting to sell off now and get out of the system, and they're trying to, sell and let the retail investors into the system because they believe that the stock market is going to continually rise. And from the beginning of this year of 2014 until now, the market has come down around 1,000 points at the time, and things are not looking well. Now, I understand we had the Super Bowl. Nothing happened. This does not mean they are not going to do some type of false flag event. They are building up the propaganda with Syria. They are building. Just because something doesn't happen doesn't mean it's going to not happen. It's almost like if you're looking at a hurricane coming in and they're telling you it's coming and you decide not to get prepared for it, and this one passes, and then another hurricane is coming right after it, and you say, you know what, the other one didn't hit us, so why should I even prepare? And all of a sudden this hurricane was the worst hurricane you have ever seen. You didn't have water, you didn't have food, you didn't have batteries, you didn't have medicine. Everything is a mess because you didn't understand. Just because the one storm didn't hit doesn't mean another one cannot. And this is just on a side note, up in New York when Hurricane Sandy hit, I have relatives that live there. They didn't believe that anything was going to happen, and I've talked about some of this before. They didn't believe, they didn't stock up on batteries, they didn't have food in the house, they didn't have water, and guess what? For those 5 to 7 days, they struggled because they couldn't find any batteries. They were freezing in their homes. They had no food to eat because they were not prepared. And you have to understand what the central bankers, the U.S. government, is doing. They need to build up the propaganda and build their propaganda case against Syria at this time. They understand that the economy is collapsing, and they understand they only have a limited amount of time. And they are putting all this together at this time. And I'm going to go through this during this report, but let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to head out to Greece right now. And again, Greece is looking for their third bailout, and Greece is not doing well. Piling debt on top of debt on top of debt does not help a country. In my was it 2 reports ago, I discussed someone who actually lives in Greece. It is very tough and very hard to live in that type of an environment. And we're seeing this happen and spread all across Europe, and eventually it will hit the United States. This is actually how it happened in the Great Depression. Europe was in turmoil. They were in a recession/depression. Things were terrible in Europe. In the United States, the market was continually going up and up and up, and back then it only reached about 400 points, but the actual economy of the people who worked and who were on food lines, who lived in tent cities, were having a very tough time. But that was kind of kept hidden, because they wanted all eyes on the stock market. And eventually when the market comes down, again, this is not an indicator that the economy fell. This is the last piece of the puzzle that comes down, and everyone goes, oh my God, what just happened? It's almost like 2008. When the stock market came down, everyone woke up. But before that time, no one realized what was happening. Housing was struggling before the stock market came down. People were being laid off from companies. Companies were closing, and no one realized it until the stock market collapsed. And right now, the Greek people, they need more money. They need another bailout. And of course, they're going to have to do further debt haircut, and they're going to have to do more austerity to receive the package of about 10 to 20 billion euros, and it's not going to be easy for the people in Greece, and this is just going to spread all across Europe. Now, Dell has come out today, and they are laying off 15,000 people. 15,000 people are going to be laid off. Now, I wonder how the BLS is going to calculate this and factor in the people falling off the extended unemployment and these huge amount of layoffs. We also see Novartis laying off around 4,000 people. So companies are starting to lay off thousands upon thousands of people. And Dell, I'm not really shocked. We're going to see a lot more PC manufacturers and electronic manufacturers lay off people because the electronic industry and the PC industry has been declining. People do not have the disposable income to buy these products. And we saw H.H. Gregg, Best Buy, all showing sales declining in this area, and we're going to see many more companies start to lay off people and reorganize because the sales are just not there. People do not have the disposable income to go out and buy the new next and great, TV, the next stereo, the next Blu-ray player, and they are more worried about clothing their family, feeding their family, paying their rent, and this is what we're seeing right now. Now, car sales, Ford and GM, their sales completely tumbled. And of course, they're blaming it on the weather. And again, Mercedes, their sales were up because, again, the rich are able to afford those cars. And they didn't have any problem with the weather. And they always use the excuse of the weather is the problem. But, Ford and GM January car sales tumbled to 7.5 and 12%. It is completely terrible. And what we're seeing right now, and I mentioned this back in November, December, GM is continually channel stuffing the the dealerships right now. They are pushing more and more cars into the dealerships to show that they're manufacturing, to keep the manufacturing up in the United States, and it's also showing that they are selling cars because they are producing them and giving them to the dealerships, but the dealerships cannot unload them. And back in November and December, I reported that they had about 81 days worth of supply on their lots, and now they have about 114 days of worth of cars on their lot. And this goes on to say that GM's channel stuffing pipeline rose by another 42,000 cars, increasing the stock of cars parked at dealer lots and collecting dust to 780,000 from 748,000 in December. So you can see what they're doing. These are all manipulated numbers to make you believe that things are going perfectly, that there is a recovery. But when you look through all the crap, you see it isn't. This is an illusion. And of course, how long can they keep the illusion up? We will have to see. Now, the ISM manufacturing dropped by its most since 2008. It missed by its most on record, and new orders collapsed at the fastest pace since 1980. And if we look at this, the manufacturing for new orders is down by negative 13.2. It is not going anywhere. So when we look at all this, and we look at real estate, we look at retail, we look at the automobile industry, we look at the amount of layoffs that are coming down the pike here, and we look at the illusion numbers of the GDP, inflation. These are all recalculated numbers over and over again, and unemployment, which has been recalculated and manipulated. We can see that the real economy is completely declining and collapsing right in front of our eyes. The illusion is the stock market and the manipulated numbers, where everyone is looking at that saying these are the real numbers. The stock market is the indicator of what the economy is doing, so it must be doing well. And then if you look at the real economy and the real numbers of what companies are doing and what stores are closing, housing that's struggling just to stay afloat here, we can see what is actually happening. And then if we look at what the Fed has done, it has taken all the toxic real estate off the bank's books and shoved it onto the Fed's books. And all it did was remove it from the banks and move it over to the Fed. And this is what we are seeing right now. And they are now tapering. We're seeing the markets having a tough time, and they are falling every single day at this point. Yeah, they bounce up a little bit, but they come down hard. And we've seen this before. We saw it in 1929. We've seen it in 2008 when the markets hit an all-time high. They bounce up and down at the top, and all of a sudden, they come crashing down. And this is the point that I'm trying to make here. The Fed and the U.S. government do not want to be blamed for this collapse because they were just out there, and of course the president was out there telling you that we are in a recovery, that everything is fantastic. Housing sales is up. People are getting jobs. And how does this look if it all of a sudden it crashes the next day? And we have to think back to 2008 when Ben Bernanke said that the Fed is not forecasting a recession in the same year the recession happened. I have always said this. The government officials always tell you the opposite of what's really going on. So if you look at what President Obama says, it is completely the opposite. We are in deep trouble at this point. Now, of course, the debt ceiling debate is coming up in February right now. And the Treasury Secretary Lew, he is warning that the U.S. might default. Now, we've heard this before. We heard this back in October, and we know what they're going to do. They're going to raise the debt ceiling. Why? Because they have absolutely no choice. If they do not raise the debt ceiling, they're going to have to cut all these programs. They can't borrow money anymore. What are they going to do? The whole entire system will collapse. So they're not going to let that happen. And this goes on to say that the Obama administration warned on Monday it could start defaulting on the government's obligations very soon after hitting a limit on the national debt later this month. And without borrowing authority, at some point very soon, it would not be possible to meet all the obligations of the federal government. And just think about what they're saying here for a minute. If they don't borrow money, they can't pay for anything. That just tells you right there that the revenue coming in from everyone who is working in the United States is not enough to support what is going on here. And the only way to support it is with borrowing money. And this is not a government that is strong, that is able to work. It is a government where it's struggling to exist, just like Greece, just like Cyprus, just like Spain, just like France. They're all borrowing money because they cannot build the revenue high enough to support all their debt. The only difference in the United States is that the Fed can print the money for the government. That is the only difference. If we cut that off, the government cannot make it. It cannot function without borrowing money to pay the debt. So we have to think of it. It has to borrow debt to pay the debt. Makes no sense. Now we understand that the government needs to find new revenue. It needs to expand the debt, and this is why they're in the Middle East. This is why they're in Africa. This is why they're in Ukraine. And right now, Elizabeth Warren wants the post office to be a financial institution and give payday loans, give cash your checks for you, and she thinks this is a fantastic idea. So all you people who've ran your credit cards up to the max and can't take any more out on credit cards, you can now go, not yet, she's proposing this, that you can go to the post office and get a loan from the post office with interest, of course. And if you don't have a bank account, you can go there and cash your check. And this is how they want to keep the post office continually operating from all the interest and taking fees from cashing your checks. So everyone that is having a problem, they're losing. The government realizes they're losing business by all the people who do not have a bank account, who have taken their paychecks, going to cash checking centers, all the people that are going to the payday loan areas. They want a piece of that market. So she's proposing that the post office can do this because she says there's not enough bank branches around in many of the locations, and it would be a lot easier for people to go to the post office to do all their financial transactions. I don't know, where I live, I can go down a street and I can count about 8 bank branches just on my street. Okay, now we understand that President Obama, the central bankers, want to disarm the American people. We understand that he's created executive orders, that there's gun bills pending in the Senate, the UN Arms Treaty is pending in the Senate, and he's already said that he's going to use executive orders to push this agenda forward. But the states are fighting back. Florida's fighting back, Missouri's fighting back, and Arizona now is also fighting back, is now pushing to nullify all federal gun laws and stop state enforcement of them. They're pushing Bill SB 1294, all federal regulation which violate the Second Amendment, that would be any federal gun law, would be recognized as invalid and void in the state. The legislation also prohibits the state from enforcing any federal act, law, order, rule, or regulation that relates to a personal firearm, firearm accessory, or ammunition within the limits of the state. And we're seeing a lot of states fight back, and this is their right, and they do have the ability to do this. Again, I've said this before, there shouldn't be any reason to do this because these laws are completely null and void under the Second Amendment anyhow. Now, the feds would like to require that all new vehicles talk to each other when you're driving. And the U.S. Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has approved a V2V communication system that regulators say will increase safety, reduce accidents, and pave the way for connected cars. The technology federal regulators propose uses a dedicated short-range radio network that allows vehicles to talk to each other up to 300 yards away. V2V would provide a 360-degree view of a vehicle's surroundings, allowing the car to see what the driver can't. And there are already car manufacturers on board with this, and that's Audi, Volkswagen, BMW, Ford, General Motors, Honda, Toyota, and they're all developing V2V technology. But we have to be concerned about this because of privacy and someone hacking into the system and taking control of what your car is communicating. They also have the ability to track you and understand your driving habits, understand where you're going, and this is a very big concern. And I understand that they're saying, oh no, it keeps no privacy, it doesn't look at anything, but we've heard this before from many companies, and it always turns out to be the opposite of what they're saying. And again, if they're using short-range radio network, anybody can hack into this, take it over. We've seen drones hacked into, and they lost the control of these drones, and this could cause a huge, huge problem. Okay. Now, the U.S., we have to understand, is in the Middle East, it's in Thailand, it's in Africa, depending on if they have complete control of the government in these countries, they are then for the government. If they do not have complete control of the government, they are on the rebel side. So in Thailand right now, the United States warned against moves to stage a military coup in Thailand. They're telling the protesters, calm down, let's do this, diplomatically. We don't want a coup here, and we want to talk about this. But then if we look in the Ukraine, it is completely opposite. They're telling the people there, because they're not in control of the government, to riot, to push the government out. So we can see how the U.S. government, the central bankers, play this because they really want to take over the country, put a puppet regime in there, and then, sell their natural resources using the U.S. dollar, implement NATO, and take complete control of the country. And this is what they have done with many, many countries. Now, Russia is right now saying that they might back out of the START treaty due to the missile shield in Europe. Russian Foreign Ministry top disarmament official has warned that if the U.S. continues to boost its anti-missile capabilities through developing missile defense system in Europe, Russia may have no other option but to withdraw from the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. So what prompted this response? Well, the American dedication to deploying missile shield in Europe, especially the announcement made by the U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel at the Munich Security Conference of the deployment of the Navy destroyer USS Donald Cook, equipped with Aegis shipboard integrated combat weapons system, which was moved into Spain. And I discussed this in a couple of other reports. Now, the United States is taking their ship. They moved it into a port into Spain. It's equipped with more advanced weapons, and the United States central bankers are beefing up the missile shield in Romania, in Poland, and in this area. And Russians are very concerned about this, and this goes on to say that the West is being very confrontational. If NATO gets up to the Russian border, the Ukraine, which they're trying to do because they're trying to remove the government in Ukraine, then they would be right on the Black Sea. They can join Ukraine to NATO, and they'd be right up against Russia. The Russian foreign minister said, I have no doubt war will break out in the middle of Europe. So he sees what is happening right now. They didn't remove the missile shield in Europe. Of course, the central bankers, the U.S. government said this missile shield was because of Iran. They are now talking peace with Iran, and Russia said to them, why don't you remove this missile shield? Of course, they beat around the bush. They really didn't answer them, and they're actually increasing the missile shield, adding more sophisticated missiles, and they would never ever remove it because really the missile shield is for Russia and China and not for Iran. Now, China is preparing a new ADIZ in South China Sea. China is laying out plans for another air defense identification zone in the South China Sea. A draft plan for the ADIZ has already been completed. The air zone could also go on to cover the entire South China Sea. And you can see what is happening. They're already mapping their areas and saying, this is ours, do not come into this area. And of course, the U.S. is going to provoke China now with sending in ships and planes to provoke these areas because they're saying it's not allowed. Now, and this is all how it gets started, and this is how it's going to lead into war. Now, other countries are very worried about riots, coups, protesting, and this is why a lot of the countries across the globe have been implementing draconian laws like you can't protest and things like that. Saudi Arabia has taken a step further, and right now the Saudi authorities have introduced a draconian new law that labels anyone who speaks ill of the country or its king, they are now terrorists. We can see this kind of almost like the NDAA here in the United States. If the president deems you a terrorist, you are sent into prison for a year, and you do not get an attorney or anything like that. You do not. There's no due process of anything. So right now we can see all the countries, they are taking and they're getting ready because they understand as things get worse, people are going to rise up, and of course they're putting all these laws into place hoping that this will stop the people and also gives them the right to arrest them or take them and put them away and silence them, and hoping that no one else will do anything. And this is why this really happens. But King Abdullah ratified the new laws that mean it is now illegal to defame the state or disturb public order. The terrorism law would allow the government to label any Saudi who demands reform or exposes corruption as a terrorist. So we can see where this is going right now. Okay, now we understand that Congress, behind closed doors of course, decided to send military assets to the Syrian rebels, which are the paid mercenaries of the CIA, the U.S. government. They are the rebels that are being paid to overthrow Assad. And now we have shipments of weapons heading towards there. And Jordanian News has just revealed that U.S. airplanes loaded with fatal weapons landed in Jordan to deliver the weapons to the armed terrorist groups in Syria. So they are pushing the war forward. And what do we understand? Well, we understand that they're having these Geneva II talks between the opposition and the Syrian government, and of course the opposition is controlled by the U.S. government central bankers, and these talks are going absolutely nowhere because the agenda of these talks is to have Assad removed, and he's not just going to say, okay, I'm out of here, you can take over the country, this is what you wanted anyhow. So that's not going to happen. So what else is happening? Well, we understand that before these Geneva talks went forward, what has happened is that they had reports come out that they say that Assad has been committing war crimes. They've been showing propaganda from the Human Rights Watch, which is a propaganda tool for the U.S. government, presented satellite images that purport to show large residential areas having been completely obliterated and removed by the Syrian armies. The Human Rights Watch organization alleged that the demolitions represented a war crime, and the UN Security Council should now refer the Syrian government for prosecution. This is all propaganda to get Assad out of there. There is also evidence that they have been, not evidence, but pictures they've been showing right before the Geneva II that the Guardian and CNN reported, which claimed that there were about 50,000 images of industrial-scale killings of prisoners carried out by the Syrian state forces. And again, this was all created to make it seem like Assad is a war criminal at this time. They need to remove Assad so they can put in a puppet regime. And this is why they're doing this, because you have to remember their first go-around failed in August. They used the false flag event. They couldn't produce real evidence, which they never did. And then it came out that there was no attack by Assad, because we have to remember back in that time, Assad and Putin invited the UN Security Council in there to inspect on a different incident of chemical weapon use. While they were there, all of a sudden Assad decided to use chemical weapons. It makes no sense. The whole thing fell apart because there was no evidence. Right now they're showing pictures and satellite information with no proof or evidence backing it. They're just showing images. We have no idea what has happened, and they cannot give any proof at this time. But this is being used as propaganda to remove Assad from the area, from government, I should say. Now, how do we know that a false flag event is going to eventually occur? Well, they've been building the propaganda up. They understand, and they've come out and said it, that the people of the U.S. will not march to war. John Jay Carney has said this, that people will not do it. And it was proven back in August that people had no stomach for it. They didn't want to have anything to do with Syria. Congress did not want to go to war, and this is why they used that backdoor approach. Now, of course, we have the NSA spying. And of course, they are trying to spin this now, that because of Edward Snowden's leak of what they were actually doing, spying on every single American, which is a complete violation of the Fourth Amendment, and they're trying to blame Edward Snowden right now, that national security has been weakened. And what they are trying to do, and this is from General Keith Alexander, you know, the one who lied to Congress when specifically asked if they were spying on American people, and he just lied straight out. Well, he is saying now, because of Snowden's leak, that the U.S. computer network against cyber attacks has weakened a lot, and they can't protect everything that's going on now. Because Alexander wanted to use the NSA's powerful tools to scan the internet traffic for malicious software code. He insisted the NSA could kill the viruses and other digital threats without reading consumers' private emails, texts, and web searches. And this is what he was going to propose before Snowden came out with his information. But after Snowden began leaking NSA systems for spying in cyberspace last June, the result was the U.S. officials have struggled to respond to the daily onslaught of attacks from Russia and China and elsewhere, a vulnerability that the U.S. intelligence agency now rank as a greater threat to national security than terrorism. They're saying that they could have stopped it before, but because of all these leaks from Snowden, they cannot guard against any of these attacks that are coming here. And this is why President Obama went out and said, listen, and he gave a warning last summer to Chinese president to halt with the cyber attacks on U.S. corporations, and please, and he begged him to just stop right now doing the state-sponsored hacking. And of course, this is all propaganda to make you believe that the Chinese are actually doing this, because this is how they are preparing to cover this up and build the propaganda. Now, we understand the Syrian Electronic Army allegedly has been attacking many different sites. Microsoft, supposedly they attacked CNN, which we all know this is not true, because they attacked CNN and put that the Chinese were dumping treasury bonds, that they were going to war. I mean, it was just ridiculous. The Syrian Electronic Army wouldn't care about that if there really is a Syrian Electronic Army. And they hacked Microsoft, and now it has just come out that the Syrian Electronic Army hacked PayPal and eBay sites. And this goes on to say the hacking was a show of arms, and the group claims that it took no data. As their previous form, the SEA made their claims on Twitter, and in both cases, the SEA account was able to produce images of the hacked web pages. The breach, the defacement were done on Saturday evening. The websites were affected for around an hour, according to reports, and the SEA said that it hoped people learned a lesson. Now, of course, they're giving this information over Twitter. Anybody can make up a Twitter account. I can go on there and make a Twitter account saying that I'm the Syrian Electronic Army number 22. It's absolutely meaningless the way this is being done. It is all being used to set up the next false flag event. And what else do we know? Well, over the weekend, an Iranian commander, he has said that, and this is a top commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, boasted Saturday that his forces have plans in place to attack the United States from within should the U.S. attack the Islamic Republic. America, with its strategic ignorance, does not have a full understanding of the power of the Islamic Republic. Brigadier General Salami said in a televised interview, "We have recognized America's military strategy and have arranged our abilities and have identified centers in America that will create a shock. Reports indicate that terrorist Hezbollah forces, allies of Iran, have infiltrated the U.S. and have mapped out targets." So we can see what is being prepared right now. If the central bankers cannot get into Iran, we understand they will use a false flag event. And they are preparing for this. They are making sure that everyone realizes what is going on. I have reported that CNN had intel of Assad having chemical weapons hidden away. We've had Hagel out there saying, no, I'm sorry, it was Alexander saying that that Assad also has biological weapons, and right now a new report came out that Syrian President Assad is reportedly hiding chemical and biological weapons in an Alawite enclave near the coastal city of Latakia. And the new information has created doubts in the West about whether Assad will meet his commitments to destroy all Syria's chemical weapons. We can see what is happening right now. They are building the propaganda and making everyone believe that Assad is ready to strike in here in the United States. They are also building up the propaganda for Iran because they don't know if they can infiltrate the banks of Iran, put their natural resources using the U.S. dollar, so they have to take precautions. They built up the propaganda prior to August, when they had the false flag with Syria, and if you go back and look at all the news reports prior to that, you can see if they crossed this red line, if they used chemical weapons, and they had little chemical weapons explosions, little chemical weapons, and they continually went on and did this until the last one. This is how they do it. It's very incremental. They build their case, and then they do the false flag. Again, they have very little evidence when they do this. So this time what they're going to need to do is they're going to have to do something here on American soil, because the American people, and they know this, will not go to war or attack Syria if it's not done on American soil. This is why they've been using the propaganda of the Syrian Electronic Army. In the last month or so, how many times have the SEA hit America's companies? During the Geneva II talks, even before, all of a sudden there's huge amount of reports about biological weapons, chemical weapons, hidden weapons, war crimes, and just all the propaganda coming out right now. The Geneva II talks are not going anywhere. They will take this to the next level. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.